the aftermath. Every uniform has a story. Every story leaves an aftermath. This is a storytelling series featuring people who serve in high-stress professions, revealing who they were before the job, during the job, and who they became after. These aren't interviews. They're real people sharing real moments. Today's episode, retired New York City Correction Officer NATASHA Misty Walker.
Hi, my name is NATASHA Misty Walker. Most people refer to me to Misty. I am a New York City retired correction officer from Rikers Island. I did 20 years, completed and done, and this is the aftermath of my life as Misty NATASHA Walker.
Okay, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the streets of Brownsville. I grew up in Howard Houses, the projects, on the Glenmore side, and that's where I was raised.
And where did you go to school?
I went to school in Brownsville at first, and then my mom busted us out. I went to a school in Bensonhurst, learned a lot from that. And then after that, I went to private school, Pilgrim Christian Academy, where I went until I was in junior high school. And that's where I got my religion background and foundation from as well, until I went to Francis Lewis in Queens as high school.
What was that like being bused from Brooklyn to Queens in those days from Brooklyn to Queens? How did you commute? The buses picked you up?
So how I commuted was I had a school bus that picked me up, and believe it or not, it was very little black kids. The black kids was busted out. We was all on the same school bus, but we weren't in the school like that. So the percentage of black kids in the school may have been like 20% to the white kids in the school. And although we was all black from the school bus coming from Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy and Brownsville, the school itself, we were the minority.
So it's pretty much segregated.
It was segregated and it was still very racist.
What year was this around?
I'm going to say this was like 1982. I went there from second to fifth grade. I went there until my mom had enough. And that was because I was doing okay. But when my brothers got busted out, that was a whole different scenario. That's when it was time to really leave, because the racism was very loud with little black boys than it was with black girls.
How would you describe the culture of Brooklyn during those times?
So the culture of Brooklyn is diverse. When I say diverse, I mean we was in the projects. But although we was in the projects and we are considered the minority, we still had values. Family fun, Coco Levy, red light, green light, the parents on the bench, the hanging out all day, the parks, the jams, stuff like that, until the later years come along. And then as the later years came along, then the culture changed a lot. And then that's where the violence came in with the drugs, the crack era. And yeah, that changed our community a lot, because now you have people fighting for drugs, you have stealing, robbing, and the morality went down. But the foundation, I would never, ever trade that in for the world. The foundation was a great childhood until young adulthood.
What did you do after you finished high school?
So I finished high school at 17. I went straight to BMCC. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do. At first, I was going to go into the military. Coming from Brooklyn and where we come from, although I went to college, we was always taught survivorship. So we knew to take these city tests. So although I didn't know what anything was, I was taking the city test because that's what I was instructed to do. But I went to BMCC, and from BMCC, I went to John Jay. And then while I was in John Jay, my last semester, corrections called me. I was in banking from 18 to 24 until I started corrections.
Okay, I heard you mention that you're a mom. So when did you become a mom?
So at 19 years old, I got pregnant. I was in BMCC. I got pregnant at 19. I had my daughter Kimani at 20. And I became a mom at 20. And that's when things became serious. So I went from BMCC playing cards in the basement all day to John Jay and getting my life straight, night school, and figuring things out. I was a new mom. I had a great family support system. But yeah, I knew things were serious. It was time to get out the projects, have a better life for me and my daughters.
And were you an officer then or still in banking?
I was still in banking when I had Kimani. Kimani was 3 years old when I became an officer. So I was in banking, I was in Citibank, and I got that call one day at the bank from Dominique. I would never forget it. Yo, you want to be an officer? I was like, yeah. He was like, well, you need to get down here tomorrow. And sure enough, I got down there. I didn't know what officer, police officer, correction officer. I just knew that it was one of these city tests.
What was the process like transitioning from pretty much banking into law enforcement?
That transition was rough because although I came from the project, I wasn't the quote unquote project girl, as most people would know if they see this. I was a church girl. As I got old in teenage years, I had a lot of struggles with the females my age. A lot of people have female friends from the projects that they say is their friends for life. I don't have not one. The people that were supposed to be my friends, I wound up fighting them because I was a church girl and I was different. I didn't want to smoke weed. I didn't want to sleep with the project guys. That just wasn't my life. I was just about something different. So becoming an officer was a drastic change for me because I didn't even know what a CO was. So I just knew what a cop was. I took the first combined test that they gave, and they was like, hey, you want to take a combined test? I was taking a PD test, and we took it. So when corrections called me first, the transition was a little different because I heard of Rikers Island, but I didn't know what that was. I ain't never been up there or whatever. My brother got in some trouble, ironically, when I was going through the process, and he was in OBCC, and that was my first experience of Rikers Island. And I was like, hell no, I'm never coming up here again. So it was new for me becoming an officer. It was definitely corporate America and blue collar, two different worlds.
So, what was it like when you first went into a jail as a correctional officer? How was that for you emotionally, mentally? What was that like?
I was quitting. I got into that jail. First of all, it was a shell shock. I've never seen a building that big. I come from the largest jail on Rikers Island, which is C95 AMKC. I couldn't imagine hallways being that long, seeing men live like that, a man's jail. And then on top of being a man's jail, it was a mental health jail. And then on top of the mental health jail, it was a detox jail. It was too many shell shocks for me. And then I'm looking around and I'm seeing these people walking around all free and walking up to me and stuff. I didn't know how to process that. Even coming from the projects, it was like, hold on, what's happening here? But what happened really was I wind up getting there, and I remember being up in the quads, and I started on a midnight tour. And that was traumatizing. I started a midnight tour in C95. There's no B officer. The officer is mad because I didn't know how to get there. So they throw the keys. They left me there. I'm taking account, or what I think I'm taking account. And I'm sitting there in this dark cell area. And I knew to lock the gates. And I'm watching inmates at the time pop out the cells. It was such a shell shock. It was like, no way, I am quitting. I just knew I was quitting. And then I had an officer come at 3:00 in the morning, and it was his steady post, Colazo. And he was like, you're going to be all right. And I had a lot of officers in C95 tell me I was going to be all right. Working for New York City Department of Corrections in the beginning, it was something that I had to balance. Being a mom to a young lady and a young girl, for me, my main goal was just seeing her watch me grind. I was going to balance my daughter seeing me grind and me make a better life for us. You understand? I didn't think about nothing besides us having a better life and her not growing up in the environment that I grew up in and making life better, letting her see that I was still working, I had education. So everything about at that time was making sure the money and everything was correct to make a better living life. The balance was okay because I was still young. So at 24 years old, I still got energy. So I made sure that I was still at all the games. I made sure she was in swimming. I made sure that I made every graduation. I made sure that I could balance those things out. And I had family support. I had my mom. So when you live there and you live with your mom is raising your kids for you. As long as I get home, I was able to sleep, I was able to do doubles, I was able to do those things. So that helped me balance my family life out in the beginning very well until I got married.
Oh, so you got
We could talk a little bit about that. At 27, I got married. I got married to a friend of mine who was platonic and we had a relationship. He had no children. I had my one child that he embraced. It was kind of easy to get married to a friend because y'all kind of know each other. So we kind of got the show on the road. So we got together in 2000. By 2001, we done bought a house in May. We had a big wedding in September, which everybody was at, and it happened to be September 11th weekend. So we got married September 15th. By December, I was pregnant with his first child, my second child, which is my daughter. 2 years later, I had a son from him, and everything was fine. He worked for MTA. We was both blue collar. We was able to balance it out just fine. Once again, we had family support. I had his aunt who came and basically lived with us, and I was able to put back on my uniform in 3 months, go back to work, get back to grinding, and know that my kids was always home and safe and family taking care of them. And it worked out really well. 3 kids later, life was just great. My greatest takeaway for being a New York City correction officer is getting to know people, the transparency. I've learned so much about personalities, spirits, people. I'm able to watch you and know, observe. I learned so much about mental health, things that I couldn't imagine learning out in the street. I learned patience. I learned tolerance. I learned boundaries. I learned how, as soft as you are, that you have to harden up.
What advice would you give someone who is preparing or planning to go into a high stress career like you had?
My advice that I would give is number one, to stay prayed up. Also, keep in mind who you are. Never lose who you are because you could get very caught up into all the different environments. And I personally remained who I was. When I left Rikers Island, everything that was on Rikers Island was on Rikers Island. When I went across the bridge, I became NATASHA Misty again. I became mom. I never brought that stuff home. Don't let that stuff eat you inside. You have to stay the person that you are. The only way you could do that is definitely by meditating, staying prayed up, remaining true to who you are. Because the job could change you if you allow it to change you. I've never allowed the job to change me. I never allowed the job to change my spirit. I had bad days, I had good days, but I knew how to separate it. You have to keep the lifestyle separated when you come from a high volume job like that. And just always keep in mind that another day is a different day. Don't bring nothing home with you. You always keep things where they are. Handle it there, and that's it. I didn't have no outlets, no vices. I had fun, but I didn't have vices. That's very important. No, people get there as high stress. They begin drinking. They've been doing things that they never done before. Stay focused. Stay prayed up. Stay in the mindset of you there for a reason, and that's just for a better life and for the money. So that's mine.
Let's give it up for our girl, NATASHA Misty Walker.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another Aftermath story. If this journey inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Tina Booker TV for more stories of purpose, perseverance, healing, and hope. Until next time, remember, every uniform has a story. Every story leaves an aftermath.